It hit like a royal-sized earthquake. The Maxwell deposition pages swing open, and suddenly the whispers aren't whispers anymore. They're headlines in waiting. And the palace? They didn't rush out with a calm statement. They didn't send out a charming spokesperson to correct the record. They did something colder. They froze. Because when a monarchy is scared, it doesn't scream. It goes silent. The kind of silence that makes people feel like the walls have ears and the chandeliers are listening. And right there in the middle of it, the transcript paints a nightmare scenario. Prince Andrew's name isn't floating alone in Scandalland. It's surrounded by what's described as 8 other high-status figures tied to royal circles. 8 names. 8 doors. And then the one detail that makes the whole thing feel like a match tossed into gasoline, a suggestion that one door may swing uncomfortably close to Meghan Markle's missing years. Now listen, the palace has survived drama, affairs, leaks, books, interviews, even bitter family wars dressed up as private matters. But the transcript frames this as something else entirely. Not messy, not emotional, dangerous. Because the question shifts in a single breath. Not, why didn't they like her? But, what did they know that Harry didn't? And once that question lands, you can't unhear it. Inside Buckingham Palace, the transcript describes the response like a security lockdown, zero trust, doors closing, phones going quiet. And it paints Prince William as the man who doesn't argue with a threat. He contains it. No more soft warnings. No more careful diplomacy. Just a brutal cutoff. Montecito goes dark. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the mood in Montecito is described like a storm creeping under the door. Harry isn't doing speeches. He isn't playing confident prince. He's pacing. The way a man paces when the story he married into starts to look like a trap with velvet curtains. Because in this narrative, Harry's not just defending his wife anymore. He's calculating something far worse. What if the palace wasn't cold? What if it was cautious? What if the institution wasn't trying to punish him, but trying to avoid a catastrophe? And that's where the transcript drags us into the zone the royals never want the public to stare at too long. The elite shadow world. The places with no paper trails, no tidy explanations, and no official records that match the lifestyle on display. The transcript paints those missing years, the fuzzy stretch between 2013 and 2016, as a timeline full of luxury that doesn't neatly match a struggling actress narrative. Not small upgrades, not a nice dinner here and there, but global movement. Hotspots like Istanbul, Phuket, St. Bart's, the French Riviera. The kind of places where billionaire access is normal and privacy is treated like currency. And the story it's pushing is sharp. If you're living like that, someone's paying. If you're appearing in rooms you can't afford, someone's opening the door. And if you keep showing up with the same powerful cluster keeps circulating, that's not random, that's placement. Then comes the name the transcript keeps circling like a red pen. Marcus. Not framed as a casual friend, not a harmless social connection, but as a gatekeeper type. The person who's always around the corner when doors open and introductions happen. And then the real centerpiece, Soho House. Most people see Soho House and think trendy private club. This transcript paints it like something more strategic, a filter, a velvet line selection system where the ambitious don't just network, they get sorted. The language is heavy, introduced, polished, positioned, like someone's building a pathway with invisible hands. And once that idea is in the room, it poisons everything that came later because it makes the fairy tale meeting feel less like fate and more like a final step in a longer plan. Now here's where the transcript twists the knife. It suggests the 8 names in those Maxwell materials aren't random aristocrats. They're described like a cluster. European and Middle Eastern princes, the kind of royalty that moves between Monaco penthouses and Dubai towers, floating through yacht circuits without ever signing their names on anything that could drag them into daylight. And the transcript's implication is clear. If Meghan's blurry years overlap with the spaces that cluster frequented, then the palace isn't facing tabloid drama. It's facing a breach, the kind that raises alarms inside institutions built on control. Because royal families can handle humiliation. What they can't handle is unpredictable exposure. And then come the details that make gossip audiences sit up. The receipts, not documents you can hold, but objects you can't easily explain away. The transcript puts a spotlight on expensive jewelry, especially the idea of rare earrings appearing, disappearing, reappearing with timelines that don't sit still. Borrowed, gifted, story changed, story adjusted. it. And you know why that detail hits so hard? Because in public scandals, people can deny conversations. They can deny meetings. They can deny intent. But luxury items, they leave trails in photos, dates, appearances, and the minute timelines don't match, the internet starts connecting dots like it's a sport. Then the transcript drags Prince Andrew back into the frame, not as a separate scandal, not as that one embarrassing uncle, but as a gravitational force whose orbit could, in theory, overlap with other circles. And suddenly, this narrative isn't just Palace versus Sussex, it becomes Palace versus exposure. Because if your institution is built on image and someone threatens to crack that image wide open, you don't fight loudly, you move quietly, you build options, you prepare exits. And right here, the transcript starts pointing toward the most chilling shift of all, Harry, described as restless, quieter, walking like a man trying to remember who he was before the chaos, like the spell is breaking in real time. Because when a prince realizes the story isn't just family conflict, when he starts wondering if he's in the blast radius of something far bigger, that's when panic becomes action. And if the palace believes the list is a ticking bomb, then the next move won't be a press release. It'll be extraction. By the time the palace realized the story wasn't staying buried, the strategy shifted from silence to containment. Because once a list exists, even a whispered one, it stops being about proof and starts being about risk. And this transcript is obsessed with one word: exposure. Not exposure as an embarrassment, exposure as in loss of control. The kind that doesn't just damage reputations, it destabilizes institutions. Inside royal circles, the narrative suggests a cold assessment took place. Not emotional, not personal, clinical, almost military in tone. Who talks to whom? Who had access? Who overlaps? Who becomes radioactive if even one connection gets confirmed publicly? That's when the mood reportedly hardened. This wasn't about protecting Harry's feelings, this was about protecting the crown's perimeter. And suddenly, the distance between Buckingham Palace and Montecito wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. According to the transcript, communications didn't just slow down. They were rerouted. Messages went through intermediaries. Trusted aides replaced family calls. Even birthdays and holidays became procedural. Because when an institution senses a threat, it doesn't debate intentions, it limits reach. Meanwhile, the pressure on Meghan is described as mounting in a way that doesn't look like tabloid stress. This isn't about bad headlines. It's about narrative instability. The transcript suggests she becomes hyper-focused on optics, controlled appearances, selective silence, sudden pivots in branding. One moment empowerment, next moment reinvention. Always moving, always reframing. Because when the past starts circling back, the instinct isn't to explain, it's to outrun. But here's the problem the transcript keeps returning to: you can't outrun documents. You can't outrun depositions. You can't outrun other people's memories once they're under oath. And that's where the Maxwell material becomes so dangerous. Not because it names names loudly, but because it maps environments. It sketches rooms, clubs, travel routes, social hubs. Places where elite worlds overlap without needing introductions. And once you understand that, the panic makes sense. Because you don't need a photo of Meghan with anyone controversial for the damage to land. All you need is overlap that raises the question, why was she there? Why that circle? Why that access? Why that timing? The transcript frames this as the reason William's stance becomes ironclad. No more reconciliation fantasies, no more private family healing, no more bending. Because from his perspective, this isn't about brotherly tension, it's about risk management. If Harry stays close, Harry becomes leverage. If Harry stays loud, Harry becomes unpredictable. If Harry stays angry, Harry becomes dangerous. And so the door doesn't slam, it locks. What's chilling is how the transcript describes Harry starting to notice the shift. Not in a dramatic confrontation, not in a shouting match, but in absence. Calls unanswered, invitations never sent, briefings that never arrive. The slow realization that the institution he thought he was fighting has already moved on without him. And that's where the paranoia sets in. Because once you suspect you're being kept at arm's length for reasons no one will say out loud, your mind fills in the blanks. The transcript hints at this mental spiral. Harry questioning timelines, replaying introductions, re-evaluating people he once trusted, wondering whether the warnings he ignored weren't cruelty but containment. And once that thought takes root, it doesn't leave quietly. At the same time, the transcript suggests the palace begins reinforcing a single internal narrative: Prince Andrew is isolated, walled off, contained, no overlap, no blending, no shared spaces. Why? Because the worst case scenario isn't scandal, it's association. The moment Andrew's shadow touches anyone else's timeline, the fire spreads uncontrollably. And that's why the list, even without confirmation, becomes toxic, because lists invite investigation, and investigations invite questions, and questions invite answers no one can curate. The transcript goes further, suggesting that behind closed doors, advisors are gaming out scenarios. What if more names surface? What if civil cases expand? What if journalists start comparing travel dates? What if former insiders talk? Every scenario ends the same way. Distance is protection. And so Harry finds himself in the most brutal position imaginable, cut off not because he spoke out, but because he might know too little to protect himself. Because here's the twist the transcript keeps circling. If Harry truly didn't understand the depth of Meghan's pre-royal social world, if he genuinely believed the fairy tale, then he's not a co-conspirator. He's collateral. And collateral damage doesn't get briefed. Collateral damage gets moved away from the blast zone, which explains why, according to the transcript, his recent public behavior feels unmoored. The speeches don't land. The confidence wobbles. The messaging contradicts itself. It's the posture of someone realizing the fight they thought they were in isn't the real one. And Meghan? The transcript paints her as doubling down on control. Silence when silence benefits. Visibility when visibility distracts. Projects announced without details. Momentum without follow-through. Because when scrutiny sharpens, activity becomes camouflage. But camouflage only works until the terrain changes. And if more material emerges, more testimony, more timelines, more names, then no amount of branding will stop the questions. That's the cliff edge this script keeps pointing toward. The palace isn't panicking because of what's already public. It's panicking because of what could still surface. Because once a door to elite networks cracks open, it never closes cleanly. And if the public starts asking not just what happened, but who facilitated access, then the story stops being gossip. It becomes history. And that's why the final tone of the transcript feels so cold, so final, so deliberate. No reconciliation arc, no family healing montage, no return to the fold narrative, just separation. Because in royal survival logic, there's one rule above all others: you don't argue with the threat, you outlast it. And right now, everyone involved is waiting to see who cracks first: the institution built to endure centuries, or the story that refuses to stay buried. Refuses to stay buried. Refuses to stay buried. Refuses.